I must ask, you are not Astartes, but you seem to know much about them. Do you know one who turned against their sins?
Turned against their sins? Actually, yeah. Of course, for this best of the worst, we'll talk about him. This one will be odd compared to our other ones, but a few things before we start. Unfortunately, there's very few characters in the 40k universe that turned traitor, then turned against their traitor brothers, or decided to do good things. This guy is very much a traitor, but even he saw the problems with what he was doing and turned against his brothers. Of course, the thing that makes it weird is the fact that he's a word bearer, or rather, former word bearer, really. The Word Bearers Legion are the faction of Space Marines that essentially started the Horus Heresy. We'll talk about the Word Bearers in a moment, but the third weird thing about this guy is rather astonishing. He's still alive in this setting. Most of these sort of characters bite the dust in the book they're in, but this guy doesn't. Who's this guy? The Dreadnought with no name, the Anchorite. Now, like I said, the Anchorite was a word bearer. The Word Bearers are a faction that created the Imperial cult, and sort of spawned the Black Legion too. Their Primarch, Lorgar Aurelian, was on the world of Colchis, which was a world filled with Chaos worshippers, though very few knew it was Chaos they were worshipping. While on this world, Lorgar had visions of a giant 14-foot tall man in golden armor with long dark hair wielding a flaming sword doing incredible impossible acts. Lorgar obviously thought this was a true god. Like, makes sense. Biggie didn't do a whole lot really to destroy the idea that he was a deity, other than commit acts that would make people think he was an evil deity. But let's not talk about that. Before the heresy, the Word Bearers, which at that point were called the Imperial Heralds, sometimes called the Iconoclasts, were brought in under Lorgar, being trained and raised to believe the Emperor a divine being. They were originally vicious fighters who would take the children of their enemies, turn them into servants of the Emperor, making sure they remembered and knew the transgressions of their fathers, and how the Emperor forgave them and allowed them to live. Seriously, does that not sound like a cult already? But Lorgar changed them up, taking control into the priests from Age of Empires, wallowing to convert planets to the Imperial cult, which Lorgar was writing a book about, and creating the cult. Kind of. Biggie used the Ultramarines to burn their crown citadel on the world of called Monarchia, which was argued as being the absolute perfect city. The Ultramarines literally turned a city of gold and stone into ash. Lorgar wasn't happy, and neither were the Word Bearers, who went on a pilgrimage to find if there was a god worth worshipping. Now, a lot happened to lead to the heresy. Mostly one guy stole a knife and started stabbing people with it to make them chaos corrupted. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the Anchorite. All of this information comes from the book Apocalypse, so stop watching if you want to read that 5-year-old book. The Anchorite was from the same world as Lorgar, Colchis. He was very happy to join the Word Bearers and spread the Imperial message across the galaxy. He felt personally betrayed when Monarchia being sundered down. So, when finding the old religions, the Anchorite jumped on like the feds on a guy who barely surviving getting a $600 gift. The Anchorite was very vicious with his aggression. and he was fighting with fire and fury in the Istvan drop site massacres. He enjoyed killing Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders, but then something happened. While attacking Kalth, which we actually talked about during the Dantioch episode of this series, he stopped and looked around. He began to ask a question, which is very much not allowed in the Word-Bearers, who had the least number of loyalists. He asked why. He looked to his brothers and saw them fighting with foam in their mouths, and looked to their enemies, the Ultramarines, who he helped force into compliance with the Imperium. He asked why they were doing this. The Ultramarines didn't kill them on that world, though that would have been expected in the Imperium. They showed them what happened if they didn't learn and become better. The Ultramarines made them stronger, and they cut their own hands off by falling to chaos. He surrendered in that moment. He was imprisoned by the Ultramarines, and he began to pray to the Emperor to save the souls of his brothers. During this time, demons kept coming to him, whispering promises to him. He could escape, get revenge, he could destroy those who stand against him, and he refused. He threw off his name and renamed himself to the Anchorite. He preached to his captors the words of the Emperor and wrote down the Lectitio Divinitas. He began to convert others to the Imperial cult, making minor edits to the book, and accidentally founding the Ecclesiarchy. After the heresy, the Anchorite was kept a secret, but the Anchorite still looked at himself as a monster. He believed himself to only be absolved of his sins through death, so he tried to off himself, which is also against the Imperial cult dictations, but whatever. In his several attempts to do so, he got put into a Contemptor Dreadnought. Of course, the Word-Bearers heard the Imperial cult and recognized it for what it was. They immediately started hunting the one who had written it and spread the word of it, finding him on the world of Almes. Lieutenant Hyde Calder of the Imperial Fist found out about Urnabus Wash hunting the Dreadnought, and arrived on the planet to protect the Ultramarines who were also there. He brought with him a White Scar and Raven Guard, though I don't have the book and the wikis don't say much about them, so we won't be talking about those two. The Word-Bearers attacked the planet and started slaughtering en masse. They brought demons with them to rip and tear, but the Primaris Marines doom-guyed right back. A cardinal who worked with the Anchorite to make the Imperial cult begged the Dreadnought to fight with them. The Anchorite refused. He refused to fight anymore, knowing it would lead to a perpetual cycle of fighting and killing. He wanted to be better. Cardinal Eamon said that he couldn't kill a Chaos Marine, but he would die to protect the Anchorite, like all the Imperial Fists who were dying right then. The Cardinal begged once more for the Dreadnought to help, and the Dreadnought decided to simply ask the Word-Bearers to fuck off, really. They called him an anathema, and the Dreadnought realized he recognized the voice of Amotanim, the leader of the warband. With that, he realized it wasn't possible to help his old brothers. People he trained, people he fought with, they still walked the path of chaos laid out by Lorgar, and he knew they had no help. So what happened? He lifted up his giant Contemptor Dreadnought fists to protect Lieutenant Calder, then said a word in an ancient religious languages of his planet, banishing the demons back to the warp, and he began to fight. He went in with fist and blaster while screaming the Imperial edicts and decrying the Chaos cults. The Chaos Lord Amatnim destroyed one of the Dreadnought's arms, but was killed by Kald. Part of the reason the Wordbearers were defeated was because the orders were to bring the Anchorite back alive. Because of this incident, a hunt during the Indomitus Crusade was sent out to kill all Wordbearers. The Dreadnought declared that he would return in his isolated cell to go back to his meditations and penance. The Anchorite is still alive, still waiting, and still repenting. He probably the only one in this series I'll say that for. And that's why the Anchorite is one of the best of the worst. Now, shove off.